As a DEA special agent, I help take the profit out of drug trafficking. I use my degree and experience in accounting and finance to determine the source of illegal drug proceeds. I help disrupt and dismantle international drug trafficking organizations. This is a mission like no other and the adventure of a lifetime. If you are looking for a challenging and rewarding career, consider joining our team, DEA. Tough work, vital mission.
Greetings, it's your host, Gabe Morales, continuing with our series on corrupt cops. Today, I'm going to cover a former agent, Jose Irizarry, who is being called the most corrupt agent to ever work in the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration. He is presently a convict in the Federal Bureau of Prisons at a minimum security facility in Florida. But when he worked with the DEA, he freely admits he became another man and conspired with Colombian drug cartels, living a life of luxury, driving around in expensive sports cars and cruising on lavish boats, as well as spending time at his mansion in Cartagena, Colombia, and taking extravagant trips all around the world. But Irizarry states he won't go down alone or his capers, and claims that corruption was widespread within the DEA and was widely accepted among many agents. Now, I know this not to be true, because I know some very good DEA agents who truly believe in what they are doing in fighting the drug infestation and abuse of drugs that has impacted this country for decades.
Gabe, let me start out by saying that I think the drug issue, as it's evolved into what I think is narco-terrorism today, is the number one existential threat to the U.S. It's the Mexican drug cartels. But actually, it's not really just Mexican drug cartels we're talking about. We're talking about the world's most violent and prolific narco-terrorist groups that happen to be based in Mexico. And these groups, all of which have their largest foreign presence outside of Mexico in our country.
I personally have been very critical of the drug war that has gone on now for over 50 years. It only took 13 years for us to realize that prohibition on alcohol was a complete failure. And while I do not encourage junkies shooting up on corners in front of little kids and by schools, the criminalization of many Americans who have a severe drug habit filled up our prisons and jails during the 1980s and 90s and ruined the lives of millions of Americans due to their criminal records, many times for nothing other than drug offenses. Irizarry has accused many of his former DEA colleagues of joining him in skimming millions and millions of dollars off the top of the drug war. He stated we had free access to do whatever we wanted. We would generate money pickups in places we wanted to go. And once we got there, it was about drinking and girls. And when he states that, he means high-paid prostitutes. Irizarry claims that his fellow agents knew that they were only making a dent in the drug war, but their main concern was making cases, getting those good assignments in places where they wanted to go so they could party some more and enjoy in free sex with women. He said that was more of a concern than the more than 100,000 opioid deaths every year, and it appears that record will be shattered again this year. He stated, you can't win an unwinnable war. The DEA knows this, and the agents know this. The drug war is a game, and it was a very fun game that we were playing, he stated. Now, some of Irizarry's former colleagues have attacked him as being a big talker and just a bitter agent who made these claims in a desperate attempt to get a sentence reduction. But he had been debriefed by the FBI multiple times and generally gave the same stories with some evidence that could be proven when he pled in 2020 to 19 counts of corruption, including money laundering and bank fraud. And after years of the U.S. government portraying Irizarry as a rogue agent who acted alone, prosecutors have looked a little closer at over 24 senior agents accused by Irizarry of turning a blind eye and sometimes joining in on these corrupt operations. And some of these individuals even include high-ranking current and former government employees, including one who is in a senior role in Miami who appeared on TV's The Bachelorette. I won't state their name because, just like in any case, they're innocent until proven guilty. But you can look that allegation up. I don't believe Irizarry can possibly be a standalone rogue agent, as multiple individuals within the agency that employs approximately 4,600 agents, have been investigated for taking bribes from drug traffickers all the way to leaking confidential information to drug cartels and foreign government agents who are not authorized to receive such information. But by far, the biggest black eye of the DEA in recent years has been the Jose Irizarry case. And while other agents have been investigated, the Department of Justice has mostly refused to comment. One other agent, though, that has been in the press and the focus of past probes has been George Zumberos, who was one of Jose Irizarry's former partners in the agency, and they would travel extensively overseas and in Latin America. Zumberos remained a DEA agent even after he was arrested and detained on allegations of sexual assault in 2018 in Madrid, Spain. He resigned only after being stripped of his gun, badge, and security clearance for invoking his Fifth Amendment rights in 2019, when the same prosecutor went after Irizarry subpoenaed him to testify before a grand jury in Tampa, Florida. Among the many accusations of corruption by former DEA agent Jose Irizarry was a wild 2015 sex party in Colombia, attended by prostitutes hired by the very Colombian drug cartel members they were supposed to be going after. That particular event prompted the resignation of several DEA agents, including the retirement of Michelle Leonhardt, a DEA regional administrator at the time. Irizarry also alleged that it was very common to have cozy relationships between federal drug informants and agents, something that is strictly forbidden by guidelines. And he also alleged that agents would launder millions of dollars in a shell game using informants passing money back and forth, including during Operation Whitewash. That resulted in more than 100 arrests, seizure of over $100 million, and a ton of cocaine. But the DEA has also faced past criticism for letting drugs and money go, even though they evidently knew about it. Now, this has often been described as letting the little fish go to catch the bigger fish. But sometimes it appears they let the big fish go too. Many point to the example of when the CIA was working with the DEA during the Iran-Contra affair. This was a huge operation headed by then Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North of the National Security Council under the Reagan administration and other senior U.S. officials, whereby they facilitated the sale of large amounts of major arms to Iran in the hopes that we could recover U.S. hostages taken by their support groups around the world, mainly in Lebanon at the time. This deal not only involved Iran, which was the subject of an official arms embargo from 1981 to 1986, but high-level agents in that administration hoped to use funds from the proceeds of the sale of arms to Iran to help fund the Contras, which was an anti-communist rebel group in Nicaragua, which was undergoing a civil war at that time under the Sandinistas. Under the Bolin Agreement, funding to the Contras had been prohibited by Congress, but basically they used covert operations as a way to get around that as a loophole. And with the movement of money to the Contras, many people, including people I have interviewed for my book, allege that they used that money to import tons of cocaine into the Los Angeles area, which was sold by the Crips and Bloods and other gang members and drug dealers, which spread all across the U.S. during the crack cocaine epidemic. I'll have to do a totally different episode on that. That is just way too complex and too much information to include in this video. But you can find more in my book, How We Lost the Drug War and How We Can Win It Back. Getting back to corrupt DEA agent Jose Irizarry, after he made these claims, the Department of Justice Inspector General put out a report, like I said, and it did fault the DEA for failing to file reports to Congress since at least 2006. And I would bet pretty much goes back to the beginning of the drug war concerning multiple stings they were involved on. So basically what it said is they have little to no oversight. And although it appears they downplayed or found allegations by Irizarry not to be credible, these allegations prompted the head of the DEA, Ann Milgram, to order an outside review of the DEA's foreign operations, which I understand is an ongoing investigation. In the vast majority of these operations, alluding to the DEA, nobody is watching, said Bonnie Clapper, a former federal prosecutor in New York and outspoken critic of the DEA. For instance, she pointed out in the Irizarry operation, nobody cared how much money they were laundering. Nobody cared that they weren't making any cases. Nobody was minding the house. There were no controls. Rob Fattel, another federal prosecutor, pointed out that the DEA's lax oversight made it very easy to divert all kinds of funds for unauthorized purposes. And as long as money and drug seizures kept stats higher and made for good press releases, few questions were asked. Now, Irizarry estimates he laundered around $10 million, just him. And who knows how many other agents out there have also been involved in corruption. It's really anybody's guess because, like I said, there's basically no watchdogs. He spent his millions mostly on foolish things, including buying a 30,000 Tiffany diamond ring for his wife, buying luxury sports cars, and a mansion worth almost $1 million in the Colombian resort city of Cartagena. He often traveled first class to Europe with Louis Vuitton suitcases and wearing very expensive gold watches. Irizarry states that 90% of the business trips he took were bogus and were for personal benefit, not DEA operations, but that he would always note that he traveled for case-related operations. And it appears nobody ever questioned him. Case in point, in August 2014, he took a trip to Madrid for the World Super Cup finals and charged it to Operation Whitewash. But he states that when he got there, little work was done other than paying a couple courtesy calls to Spanish cops. He spent most of his time partying and eating at expensive restaurants and attending the game where he purchased prime seats, which were very expensive. Irizarry also states that he attended a big party in the Dominican Republic capital of Santo Domingo in 2014, whereby he and other agents went to a strip club and charged it to the agency. And he states it wasn't just DEA agents who were there, but also some federal prosecutors. He states that one was Marissa Darden, prosecutor from Cleveland. He said that traveled to one of the lavish parties in September 2017, where she witnessed two DEA agents taking drugs. Irizarry makes it clear that she herself didn't take drugs, but just looked the other way. And there's no indication that this was an instance that I've heard of occasionally where DEA agents have to do some drugs because they're under deep cover and could be killed if they refuse drugs. No, this was just a wild free-for-all at government expense. You and I, the taxpayers. Now, I have to state here on this video that Darden denies these allegations and via her attorney states that she fully cooperated with the investigation into alleged illegal activity by DEA agents. Another federal prosecutor named by Irizarry was Monique Botero, who at that time had recently been promoted to the head of the narcotics division of the U.S. Department of Justice in Miami. He states that Botero also witnessed illegal criminal activity by agents that was attended by informants, crooked Colombian police, drug cartel members, and prostitutes. Now, Botero's lawyers acknowledged that she was present on a yacht at a party organized by local Colombian police, but denies that she was involved in any criminal activity. And it appears to me that Irizarry is very manipulative. He did not just one day have a change of conscience and give up all this information. The information I have is that he was given up by one of his closest informants, a Venezuelan American individual who had confessed to diverting funds from undercover stings and mentioned Irizarry as his handler. Since his arrest and incarceration, Irizarry has published a book. You can look that up on the internet. I really don't want to give this guy any more money and attention than he already has. But I understand his Colombian-born wife, who he bought that big rock for, and who was spared jail time in exchange for her cooperation, decided to file divorce from him. So I focused here on crooked DEA agent Jose Irizarry and mentioned a few other individuals that he snitched on. As far as the current drug war, many people have blamed the current Biden administration for not having the cojones to enforce existing laws on the books in regards to meth, fentanyl, and tranq, which are all currently fueling the drug crisis we see in America. Again, I have to shake my head at that because I believe it has been a losing war ever since Richard M. Nixon declared it over 50 years ago. Surely, the current administration can do a lot more about border security and the flood of drugs and illegals into this country. But it was bad back in the 1970s and seems to only have gotten worse each year. I can't blame that on Republicans or Democrats. I blame that on America's drug appetite. Ann Milgram is the current head of the DEA, and she spent most of her career in New Jersey until she was named head administrator by President Joe Biden. and already has been accused of awarding government contracts to some of her past associates she knew from her days as New Jersey's Attorney General and as a New York University law professor. And I'm not making any accusations. Once again, it's innocent till proven guilty. But she supposedly was hired to clean house. And I understand she did ruffle some feathers when she removed several longtime high-ranking DEA officials she viewed as part of the cliquish culture that has allowed corruption to exist within that agency. She has stated that she has zero tolerance for racism or sexism by predominantly white male agents, even threatening that they may be fired for first-time offenses. One of her first actions was to investigate the agency, mainly due to Irizarry's allegations, in particular foreign operations, which spans 69 countries. It's a complete waste of taxpayer dollars, said Matthew Donahue, who led foreign operations until he butted heads with Milgram, and he says in retaliation was transferred to Colombia, a demotion which forced him to retire. Donahue states that he and several other high-ranking foreign DEA administrators were never interviewed for the report, which, like I said, scarcely even mentions Irizarry. He states that report was something that could have been written in 3 days, but it cost $1.5 million. Many people consider the report to be a joke, and many people state that mentioning corruption would not fare well for the agency that has spent billions of dollars over the years in the war on drugs. Iowa Republican Senator Chuck Grassley, a longtime voice against government waste and the Senate Judiciary Committee member, also ripped the review as being stunningly vague, as basically being worthless. This looks terrible to taxpayers, added Don Fox, former acting director and counsel of the Office of Government Ethics. Yes, it does look awful. I think it all stinks as far as accountability and as far as our efforts in fighting the drug war. And don't forget, it is not just DEA corruption we have to be concerned about. It has been proven time and time again that drug czars in these countries themselves, at the highest level, appointed by their presidents, and sometimes even their presidents, are actively involved in drug trafficking, taking millions and millions of dollars in bribes. And I don't even want to get into how ridiculous it would be to invade Mexico, as some politicians are stating. That's a terrible idea. It is obvious to me these people have not researched history in Latin America. If you want to help them turn to the Chinese and Russians, then go ahead and do something dumb like that. I don't know how some of these guys got elected. So, of course, we need to do something, but something different. I want to state once again, there are some really good former DEA agents. They're friends of mine that I know. So I don't want to give them all a black eye. But definitely, Jose Irizarry was a bad one. And I don't believe he's the only one out there. And something's seriously wrong with the way we have approached the drug war. That's all I'm saying. Don't just take it from me. Do your own research by carefully examining all sources from all sides and their motivations for making certain statements and putting out certain reports. I hope you learned something new from this episode. For now, this is Gabe Morales signing off for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians.